Hello everyone. We're now going to begin with the first module of the selective course Literature and English Language Teaching. The purpose now of this next 25-minute lecture is to explore some really quite complex issues around the function of literature and the way in which we, as readers of novels, poems, and viewers of plays, how we receive and understand literature. Now, in front of you is a diagram, and you can see that there are two sides to this equation. On the one side, you have the text, and the text presents its own world of concepts, feelings, attitudes. All of these are wrapped up in language. There is an author behind the text who presumably had a particular purpose in writing whatever he wrote. There is a story, a plot. There are issues, ethical issues, historical issues, social issues, which add up to the content of the text. So we are already dealing with, when we open a book, not just a passive world, but also something which has come into being, a whole force field of emotions and ideas. Equally, when we read a book, we bring our own personal experience, our knowledge, feelings, attitudes, our own knowledge of language, our own reasons and rationale for reading. And we naturally have certain expectations about what we may read. And it's at this, what we would call the interface between the text and the reader, that the text is constructed. That's to say, during the time in which you or we as readers read a novel or a poem, we are actively constructing the text during that process. Now, it's helpful perhaps to ask ourselves how we approach a book. Now, we may have certain expectations, or we may, on the other hand, have no expectations, depending on how familiar we are with the title or the story of the book in question. Some plays, for example, like Romeo and Juliet, we already know the plot, even if we've never read it or seen it, because it's a famous drama. But there are other lesser-known stories where we may not have any real expectation about what will happen. But what I'd like to suggest is that before we read, we anticipate. And when we anticipate, we ask ourselves, what do I know about this topic? Who is the author? Have I heard of him? What does the text look like? Is it 200 pages or 500 pages? Or is it a poem? Is it a series of poems? Is it one long poem or a series of short poems? We need to think about the setting and the date of the text, when it was written. What world does it describe? And then, of course, there is our own reasons for reading. What purpose have we for picking up this particular book? Are we on holiday on the beach reading for pleasure? Or are we, on the other hand, following a course and reading a book because we are required to? And then we might also have certain, shall we say, ambitions. Do we expect to learn much from this book? Do we anticipate this book will be enjoyable, boring, interesting? Will it help us in some way? And then, what does the cover blurb, what does the book itself claim it will be? And to what extent will your expectations be met by the book when you start reading it? And then, of course, we have the actual process of reading. And I suggest that there are two levels at which this happens. There is a level of questions and a level of expectations. Now, with questions, we are constantly asking ourselves, what will happen next? What will happen to the main character? We're anticipating and we're uncertain. However, there's another level at which this procedure happens, and that's at the level of expectations, where, for example, in a tragedy, to take a random example, Othello, we know at the end the main character, Othello, will die. We expect it. We may not know how it will happen, but we know that it will happen because it's a tragedy by Shakespeare. So, in other words, depending on the genre, the type of literature we're reading, we may have certain expectations. So I suggest that there's a parallel line running through the whole reading experience, which operates along this axis of questions and expectations. And as you read, you are likely to ask yourselves questions. Are you interested in this book? What will I learn about next? Who will the next characters be? What, in my personal experience, helps me to make sense of what I'm reading? So we bring our own personal experiences to the book. We also bring our knowledge of social experience, our knowledge of history, our knowledge of the world around us. How does that help us make sense of the text? And finally, there has to be a voluntary element to this. Do you want to finish the book? Why? Is it interesting? Is it exciting? Is the plot fascinating enough for you to continue reading? Then, once we've finished reading a novel or a series of poems, it's after that we can reflect on what we've read. And you can reach perhaps some conclusions. Did the book move you? Did it make an impression on you? How did it affect you? What did you learn that you didn't know before? Did I enjoy it? And then, of course, you have to consider the actual meaning or message of the book. Was there something said by the author? Did I understand what the author may or may not have been trying to say? Or did I disagree, for example, with what the author may or may not have been trying to say? One of the purposes of reading literature and learning about literature is that we get better at this whole business of interpretation. In other words, we become more competent readers. And one of the benefits for students of learning about literature in a classroom is to make them more competent as readers. So what implications are there in the classroom for this brief map or roadmap, if you like, of reading? Well, I think it's true to say that all readers are different. We bring our own experiences, our own opinions, lifestyles to a book. There may or may not be such a thing as an ideal reader. Presumably, an ideal reader is somebody who has a wide knowledge of the world, a wide knowledge of history, also a wide knowledge of other literature, so that he, for example, or she can recognize allusions to other texts. And I think, as I've been suggesting, there is such a thing as informed reading, another way of saying competent reading. And I think also, in answer to the fourth question on the slide, can this be taught? The answer is yes, it can be taught. And that is perhaps one of the benefits of this course, and hopefully other courses you've already taken in English literature. Literary interpretation is complicated. There are many factors. We've just seen the author is one factor, the reader, this whole transaction between the author and the reader, where it happens, when it happens, in what circumstances, even the purpose for which a text is read may influence the impact which a book has. Are there correct or incorrect interpretations? Well, I think yes. Clearly, some books are about certain things and cannot be confused with other issues which lie outside the text. So there are boundaries to our interpretation. Why doesn't the teacher tell me the answer? Maybe you've sometimes thought that to yourself in the classroom. Well, the answer is that the more active reader you are, the more participative you are in trying to understand a book, the more likely you are to reach a high level of competence. Finally, and this may seem like a silly question, are there good or bad books, and how are these classified? We're familiar perhaps with the idea of popular literature, literature which is widely read but also regarded as not of high quality. Now, when we start talking about literature, we are making, I think, already a classification. Okay, literature to some extent is a way of viewing particular books, and then we can ask ourselves, well, on what basis do we classify something as literature, and who is it that does this classification?